Welcome back. You're watching a News Center. Now, as promised, we're going to dig deeper into breastfeeding. This year's World Breastfeeding Week, marked in the first 7 days of August every year, is themed Protecting Breastfeeding, a shared responsibility. The focus is on how breastfeeding contributes to the survival, health and well-being of all. Now, breastfeeding is crucial for all the first 1,000 days of life and can be marred by the misconception. Our health and science reporter Chebet Birir looks at the do's and don'ts of breastfeeding.
Information on breastfeeding, an important part of a mother's journey, can be accessed when they attend antenatal clinics, but for some it is not a walk in the park. Rachel Adera is a lactation champion and midwife at the Kenyatta National Hospital.
As long as a mother is at peace in the mind and you psych your body, I don't know if that's the right word, you prepare your body for breastfeeding, the breast milk just comes. But we encourage mothers to take plenty of fluids in preparation, like during labor, they may be dehydrated through labor. So they tend to, we encourage them to take plenty of fluids, so by the time the baby is born, milk starts coming out.
Adera's work is to explain to new mothers what they need to understand to successfully breastfeed.
As soon as you put the baby on the chest and the baby has cried, the baby will just start rooting, looking for the breast where it is. It's quite interesting. So that gives us a good experience as midwives.
Mothers may experience sore nipples, making it difficult and painful to breastfeed. Adera says this can be avoided with proper latching.
The mother is expected to use the C-cup, a way to hold the breast, so that this is not allowed, because this will interfere with the flow of the milk. The sore nipple would be like here. It means the baby was attached to the nipple, and the baby was given the nipple only. So the baby was suckling the nipple only. But when you position the baby correctly, the baby will be able to latch properly, so that all this goes into the baby's mouth.
Some women are also diagnosed with inverted nipples, a condition which also makes it difficult to breastfeed.
Inverted nipples is when the nipples are inverted like inward, and so the baby is not able to latch. But with stimulation, and as the mother continues to attach the baby, the nipples will eventually come out. Okay, but when it is taking long to come out, it doesn't mean we do not breastfeed. It only means we express and put in a cup and still feed the baby as we continue to put the baby on the breast, and it will eventually come out.
For mothers who may not be able to breastfeed throughout, they will need to express their breast milk either by hand or pumps to ensure continuous feeding of the baby. Proper handling of the equipment and containers used is extremely important to prevent bacterial infections on the baby.
Breast milk can stay out of the fridge for approximately 6 hours. And then on the lower part of the fridge, it can go 6 to 12 hours. And in the freezer, when frozen, it can go up to 1 year. That is why we encourage mothers, even when they go back to work, they should still continue expressing the milk so that they store for the longest time, so their baby is able to get breast milk for a long, long time.
On what mothers should and should not eat while breastfeeding, nutritionists say that it is as simple as taking a balanced diet.
We want to focus on the mother, but not so much to tell them to eat excessive. Excessive meaning like you're telling a mother, now you have to take like this much food. What we want to encourage them is to take varieties of foods. We have different food groups, around 10 food groups, and we want to ensure that the mother is able to eat from each food group. Again, you have to also look at what is available to the mother.
Women have been breastfeeding their babies since the beginning of time, but that does not mean that it comes as naturally as expected, but it can be fun and fulfilling when done correctly with the help of mothers who have done it before, experts in the field and other members of the society. Chebet Birir, KTN News, Nairobi.
And that story by Chebet Birir leads us into our conversation this morning. It's all about breastfeeding, and I'm joined by Dr. Antonina Mutoro of the African Population and Health Research Institute Center. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. Now, it's very important for the survival of all, not just babies, that they are breastfed in the first 6 months. Explain to us why this is important.
Okay, first of all, I'll start by defining exclusive breastfeeding, which is what is supposed to happen for the first 6 months of one infant's life. So exclusive breastfeeding basically means that a mother is supposed to give her baby breast milk only during the first 6 months of life. This means that the mother is not supposed to give the child any other foods or water.
Not even water?
Not even water.
Okay.
And that's because breast milk is considered a complete meal. So it has adequate nutrients, fat, and energy that a child requires in order to grow and develop into a normal, healthy baby. And then apart from that, breast milk also contains immune factors which help to boost the child's immunity. And one of the benefits of breastfeeding to a child is that it prevents infections such as pneumonia and diarrhea.
Okay.
To the mother, breastfeeding has also been shown to prevent conditions such as breast and ovarian cancer.
Okay.
And there's also evidence to show that it also protects against type 2 diabetes.
All right. And what about gut health for the baby? What does breastfeeding for that 6 months do for the child that's consuming it?
Okay, because the baby's gut is still developing, breast milk is the best meal for the baby because the way it's, how can I put it? The way the breast milk is, it's easy for the child to digest and absorb all the nutrients from the breast milk.
Yes, so that helps the gut as it develops. But then there are people who feel like milk is milk, and then they would try perhaps to, for whatever reason, to substitute it with, let's say, goat milk, camel milk, cow milk. Explain the difference and why this is not the same thing and perhaps not very healthy for a child.
Okay, breast milk, as I said, it has all the nutrients
Yes.
as well as fats and energy that are easily absorbed by our infant's gut. When you start introducing other milks, you find that children might not be able to digest them effectively. And also, when it comes to the handling of other milks from other sources, in most cases you'll find that either they are not adequately prepared, which increases the risk of the child getting infections such as diarrhea, which is why we advocate for breast milk, because it's what is designed for the human baby to take in order to be able to grow and develop well.
Absolutely. And also, speaking of the first few months of the baby's life, and also for the mother who has just given birth, it's also good for bonding. Speak to us about what breastfeeding does for the bonding of the mother and the child, and also what it does when it comes to the risk of getting postpartum depression.
Okay, in terms of bonding, yes, breastfeeding is a very intimate, what can I say?
Practice?
Yes, it's a very intimate practice between the mother and the child. And you find that during breastfeeding, the mother is able to not only feed the child, but also in cases where the mother interacts and talks to the child, you find that the child is able to develop because at that point they're also picking up things like language. And then in terms of postpartum depression, for breastfeeding, you find that women who have postpartum depression might not necessarily want to breastfeed their children. So in such a case, when a woman has postpartum depression, they need additional support in order to encourage them to breastfeed their child and also bond with their child.
Okay, and I do understand there are chemicals that are produced when a child is breastfeeding that actually aid in the bonding. Speak to us about that.
In terms of chemicals, I cannot really comment on that at this particular point.
Okay, let's move far from that, and we're talking about nutrition. There is, of course, it is not ideal that a mother would be producing milk all the time. Speak to us about some of the reasons why some mothers do not produce milk, some of the things that hinder them to produce milk, and perhaps why it becomes then impossible to actually go the 6 months that is recommended. What usually happens, and how can mothers prevent that? What is it that can lead to a mother not having that kind of milk that the child needs?
Okay, first of all, it's important to understand that breast milk is produced on demand, which means that the more a mother puts the child on her breast, the more milk she's going to produce. So the more she breastfeeds, the more milk she's going to produce in order to meet the demands of her infant. But you find in most cases, most mothers do not breastfeed on demand due to various reasons. In some cases, they might need to go back to work early, so they're not close to their infants to enable them to breastfeed continuously. Apart from that, stress also plays a role when it comes to breast milk production, and which is why we advocate that for women who are breastfeeding, a lot of support should be provided to them in order to reduce the stress levels, and also in terms of, in cases where women need to go back to work, a conducive environment at the workplace should be provided to enable the women to express and store breast milk, so as to ensure that they have continuous supply, and also they have stock which can be given to their baby whenever the mother is away from the child.
Okay, and also let's talk about the diet that the mom should be on. Is diet directly correlated to how much milk the child is getting?
In terms of the mother's diet, breastfeeding mothers need to eat a well-balanced diet that is rich in minerals and also vitamins and nutrients. This is because the milk that they produce is also influenced by their diet.
Yes.
And apart from that, in terms of the mother's diet, I would say, because when the mother is breastfeeding, she's also losing some of the nutrients. So whenever they take a well-balanced diet, they're able to compensate for whatever nutrients they're losing during breastfeeding.
Absolutely. And when you talk about what you ingest, also there are things that you should not ingest when you are breastfeeding. Speak to us that. Can you be drinking? Can you be, what can't you take while you're breastfeeding? Because I do understand it goes directly to the child.
So it's not advisable to take certain medications, but usually for medications it's indicated, and the doctors usually provide guidance to the mothers who are taking specific medications. Apart from that, smoking is also prohibited during breastfeeding, and also alcohol intake. Women are discouraged not to take alcohol when they're breastfeeding because the alcohol is likely to go to the breast milk, and then which the child ends up consuming.
So basically it's the same principle as to do not drink when you are pregnant, then when you're breastfeeding, don't do the same things.
Yes.
Okay, so now Kenya's exclusive breastfeeding rates have decreased with age. What are the reasons for that?
Okay, so what usually happens is that you find that at the first few months, say 0 to 2 months, you find that a lot of women are exclusively breastfeeding, but then the rates keep on decreasing as the child grows older. And this is due to many reasons. One of the reasons is that you find that when the mothers are pregnant, they receive a lot of support when they attend antenatal clinics. And during the clinics, they're given information on how to feed their children in preparation for childbirth. And during childbirth, if the mother gives birth in a baby-friendly hospital, she'll also receive advice on breastfeeding, how to position the baby, and also how frequently to feed her child. But then you find that when they go home, they lack this support. So during the first months, they might have the motivation to breastfeed, but then this dwindles down because they lack support in the home environment. You find that in the home environment, they receive a lot of information from family members, from the community at large on
what they need to be doing.
Yes, which at times is not very accurate. So it creates a lot of confusion. Apart from that, you find that many women are currently working. So at around 3 months, most women are required to go back to work. And they find it, if the work environment is not conducive to ensure that the women have spaces where they can express breast milk, you find that most women opt to give their children other things because they're not able to sustain breastfeeding. So those are some of the reasons why breastfeeding rates decrease the older children get.
Yeah, and absolutely. Is there a cap that in terms of age, how long you cannot continue breastfeeding, or as long as you can?
It's as long as you can. Usually they say mothers can breastfeed their children up to 2 years, but if the mother is willing and able to continue beyond 2 years, then there's no problem with that.
Okay, now let's move on and you are from the African Population and Health Research Center, and you have noticed this decrease in the rates of breastfeeding. As the child grows older, they tend to drop off the breast. Now, when you see this, what are the methods or what are the ways that you're trying to use to encourage, mothers to breastfeed their children?
Okay, I'll talk about initiatives that the Kenyan government is trying to put in place to encourage breastfeeding amongst women.
Okay.
The first one is referred to as the Baby-Friendly Hospital Initiative, which basically creates a suitable environment within maternity wards where women give birth. So within the wards, women are provided with adequate information on breastfeeding, and then once they're discharged from the hospital, there is another initiative referred to as the Baby-Friendly Community Initiative, which works through community health volunteers who aim to provide information, breastfeeding information and breastfeeding support to mothers within the community. So the beauty of the Breastfeeding Community Initiative is that it not only focuses on the mothers, but it also includes the community at large. So there's inclusion of community leaders, fathers, and other relatives, which means that everyone is talking the same language when it comes to breastfeeding. Apart from that, there's also the Health Act, which has a provision which has guidelines on workplace support for breastfeeding mothers. And basically, one of the guidelines is that each and every workplace should have a designated area where women are able to express and store their breast milk. So such initiatives create a suitable environment which support mothers to breastfeed their infants.
Okay, now that sounds all too good, but then when you look at these realities on the ground, we have women who don't even go to hospitals for many reasons. Some just don't believe in hospitals, some are too poor to afford any form of even the transport to get them to hospital, so they depend on the local traditional, doulas. And what do you do for such women that probably would fall through the cracks when it comes to the initial care of their children?
Okay, so this is where the Baby-Friendly Community Initiative comes in, because it takes into consideration the fact that not all women have access to health facilities when giving birth. So they miss out, just as you say, they miss out on vital information on feeding practices. But through the community initiative, community health volunteers are able to visit mothers within their homes and provide information on infant and young child feeding. In addition to that, there are community support groups as well as mother-to-mother support groups where mothers can go and get information on breastfeeding from their peers. And these support groups are usually guided by the community health volunteers who have adequate knowledge and information on breastfeeding. So this ensures that breastfeeding is promoted throughout communities and not only in health facilities.
All right, and let's speak about mothers who have HIV. What then, how does this complicate their efforts to nurture their young ones, and what are their options aside from, breastfeeding? What do they do to supplement that need that cannot be ignored?
Okay, mothers who have HIV are supposed to continue breastfeeding their children exclusively. If a mother is HIV positive, when she goes to the health facility, she will be provided with medications that will enable her to continue breastfeeding her child. Breastfeeding is the best option regardless of a mother's HIV status.
Okay.
Yes.
So it's a misconception that then they should not breastfeed at all.
Yes.
Okay. Now let's move on to the supplements that are around. We have formulas, and I think most people feel comfortable weaning their children early because they feel like they can just supplement and give their helpers the supplements for them to provide it to the child as they go off to work. Speak to us about the difference between, of course, your breast milk and the formula, and perhaps why it's not up to, the same standard as the natural breast milk.
Okay. As I said, Breast milk has a lot of nutrients and immune factors which cannot be replicated in a lab setting.
Okay.
Yeah, so formula milk lacks those factors.
All right.
And then another challenge when it comes to provision of formula milk is that when it comes to its preparation, you find that because formula milk is very expensive, so you find that in some cases, people tend to over-dilute it, and also when it comes to the preparation, most people tend to use water which is not necessarily safe, which is likely to lead to infections in the child.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Now we're going to pause our discussion on breastfeeding and head over to the Lake Basin region. We're having